Welcome to the IESE Venture Hub, where we today discuss the Novicap case, a fintech startup. Now, IESE is all about the case methodology. Students taking the angle of a protagonist and helping them to solve a very challenging problem. Now, we discuss this in class, but sometimes it's also really helpful to get insights and reflection from the protagonist of those cases themselves. So it's my great pleasure to welcome today Marc Antoni Macià, the co-founder of Novicap, who has really scaled and grown the company over the last couple of years tremendously. Marc, welcome to IESE.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Marc, probably we could start just you talking about Novicap as a company. The students have just read the case. We discussed lively in class. But how did that come to be, basically, at the start? I'm pretty sure you've reflected on this a couple of times.
Yeah, so we started the company in 2014. We went through Barclays Tech Accelerator in London. And yeah, we basically spotted a problem in Spain, which was long payment terms. And yeah, that was basically the main reason that made us decide to start the company, together with the fintech boom that was basically happening all over the world, especially in the US, and was just starting in Spain.
Yeah, fintech is a hot topic for sure. And students reading the case are confronted with a revolutionary model of factor financing, basically. Now, the way I understood it, and please, you correct me if I'm wrong, you're interested in those small to medium businesses which write invoices, but they want cash more rapidly, right, than when their clients would pay them, right? And you spotted a niche there. And you have created a revolutionary model which you called the spot factoring model, and you try to reach the market with that. Can you elaborate, first of all, why you said, Novicap will work with that model, why you introduced it, and then probably reflect a bit on it. What were the lessons you got from that model?
Yeah, so the spot model was basically what we called the Google of finance, right, for us, which was a model that was fully transparent, right? It was very simple for our customers, and that's why we decided to start with that model. So the way the model worked was very simple, was pay as you go. So companies would just pay a percentage on each invoice that we would finance them.
Okay.
Very simple model.
Very interesting. So very easy to set up. We discuss in the case, of course, there are so many inhibitors of clients getting access to such financing from banks. Revolutionary easy. So it must have been a great success, Marc, no?
Yeah, initially, yes. So the first 12 months of Novicap, we grew a lot. The first month, we funded 100,000 euros. So after 1 year, we were already funding 1 million a month. So it was very, very accelerated growth. But then suddenly, after 12 months, our growth completely flattened. So we were not growing. And that flat growth continued for almost 12 months. So yeah, basically something was not working.
Something was not working. So where does one then start, right? You have a new startup, you introduce a revolutionary model, which sounds fascinating, and congratulations, right? I mean, but where does one start now to do diagnosis, right? I mean, that's hard, right? Because you're not getting validated to some extent.
Yeah. The first thing you do when something doesn't work is usually you go to sales, right? You're not selling, you go to sales. And you start pointing fingers at the sales team. That's the most common answer, both in startups and corporates alike. And yeah, and you start pointing at sales. You start basically changing your sales team, hiring new people, changing the sales processes, doing everything you can. And eventually we realized that this was not really making a difference. We were selling exactly the same, even though we hired different people, we changed our processes.
How did you realize that this revolutionary model might be actually the cause of the stagnating sales to some extent?
Yeah, so the way we realized that model was not working was, well, first of all, there was flat growth. That's a clear indicator. Second of all, we realized that our existing customers were actually not increasing their facilities, were not recommending us to anyone. So there were no referrals, no recurring business. And if you're not growing and you don't have recurring business, there's clearly something that is not working, especially if you come from a trajectory of growth and then suddenly it's completely flat.
Yeah. So what does one do when one thinks we might have to adjust the business model, right? Whom do you talk to your salespeople? Who else would get involved here? Because obviously that was something to be refined because clients were not happy, it seems.
Yeah. When something doesn't work, the answer is simple, and it's customers. The first ones you should talk to is your customers, and that's in all startup books. And everyone reads that. Some people do that, but I think the important point here is not just talking to them, but really listening to your customers and actually accepting that they might be right and you might be wrong, which is very challenging because sometimes when you start a company, you're so convinced about your product and your model that it's tricky and difficult for you to accept that a different opinion, even if it's the customer, might be the right one. And basically, that's what we did. We started talking to customers. We also spoke with partners, so basically third parties that were recommending us customers and knew our customers very well, and they started to tell us all the things they did not like about our existing product.
Yeah, how did that make you feel, Marc, right? Getting told that, what you envisioned is, the new Google of finance, might need some additional adjustments, basically.
It's difficult. And actually, that's one of the qualities you have to have. It's difficult because as an entrepreneur, you have to be stubborn because you're doing something everyone tells you you're crazy to start or to do. But at the same time, you have to be open to listen to others. And here I have to admit that our sales team was really good at pushing and convincing us internally to listen to customers more. And because of the sales team pushing us, we started to open up to listen to customers and realized that there might be other alternatives that were better than our spot model.
Give us a concrete example, let's say, of a customer decision maker whom you talk to and where you got the feedback something has to change, right? And what made you realize that?
Yeah. So basically, when you talk to the general manager, right, or the founder of an SME, right, a small company, and you speak to them and you ask them, well, do you like our spot model? Just fund as you go. And well, one of the first answers you get is, well, yes, it's convenient, but I don't like the uncertainty of whether you're going to fund my next invoice or not. Because yes, it's flexible, but at the same time, it's a bit uncertain for me as a business owner whether I'm going to get more funding from you after the first invoice. So just with the first chat with one of our customers, you realize, okay, security of having, let's say, a facility or a recurring financing facility is something important for our customers. And that was not in the spot model.
The spot model obviously is very much cheaper, Marc, right? So are costs not a factor here? I mean, I understand the uncertainty of getting the facility, but shouldn't price matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, price matters, but value is very important as well. And the perceived value of customers really depends on your pricing model. And let me explain that. So if you just price a variable fee as we had with the spot model, all the cost is in one fee, and that's how customers perceive it. If you split it in different fees, which is how the recurrent model works, and you have an opening fee in order to get a facility, and then you have a variable fee every time you get funding, the customers perceive an additional value. As we were just mentioning about security, if they pay a fee for the security of having a facility over the year, that's just for that. You're paying for the security. You're not paying for the funding. And then the other fee, the variable fee that you pay on the funding, is actually your cost of funding. So what customers perceive as price is not exactly the same as the amount they're actually paying for the product or the service. So here it was very interesting to understand what do customers value and how much are they willing to pay for each of these things. And that's very important.
Did you learn something, Marc, as to how executives in these SMEs are measured, which also made you rethink the model?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not the same if you're talking to the owner of a company or you're talking to the CFO, for instance. And why is that? It's very simple. CFOs have specific KPIs like most people in companies. And maybe the specific KPI of a CFO is what is the cost of funding. And the cost of funding is only the variable fees for us. The fixed fees in your P&L are not going to go in cost of funding. They're going to be part of, let's say, banking fees or some other type of fees. So for instance, a CFO will prefer that you split fees and that the cost of funding is actually lower and they pay a higher, let's say, opening fee or fee for whatever other service you're giving, than putting everything in the variable fee. And that's very important because their KPI is only that. So KPIs affect the decisions that your customers are going to make.
So thinking about the alternative model, which we also discussed in class, right, which is the recurring facility model, how did you know that's the right one? You knew somehow Spot is not the right one, but how did you know, well, switching to the recurring facility, that will give us an edge?
Yeah. Well, once we learned the hard way that the Spot model was not the right one, I think by then we learned that our customers were actually the right people to talk to for that. So what we did, once we had designed the new pricing and the new model, the first thing we did is, okay, let's take this and let's present it to existing customers. And they will tell us. We presented it to them. We offered them to choose. You can switch to the new model, pay an opening fee, which is expensive, and it's going to cost you more money, but you're going to have the security and all that. Or you can stay with the existing model forever. And we presented that, and the answer was pretty clear. Almost 100% of our customers decided to switch. And the most interesting part was that the ones that did not decide to switch were actually customers that we didn't really want because they only wanted to work with us for one invoice and never come back, which was not a very profitable model for us.
Sure. Marc, switching to another topic, which is your relationship with banks. It looks like your service offers a kind of substitute to what banks could offer. On the other hand, you mentioned you were part of the accelerator there from Barclays. You treat them as partners. Can you elaborate a bit on, as a fintech startup, how does that relationship play out between the big banks, the big institutions versus the fintechs?
Yeah, I think it changes depending on countries. So our experience, what I'll explain is more based on our experience in Spain. So I would say when we started back in 2013, 14, we did not exist. I mean, banks didn't know about us, so we did not exist. So we went from different phases. The first one was we did not exist. The second phase was, okay, there's a thing called fintech and some random companies doing some technology in the finance world, but they don't really matter. They're not going to do anything. They're tiny, they're small. Then the third phase was, okay, maybe they're doing something serious. Maybe this starts to matter. They start to look at us, but yeah, still not being too afraid of it. And then there's a phase where we start talking with them about collaborations and stuff. Sometimes they've copied things. Sometimes they've tried to partner. The reality is that we never had a partnership that worked in Spain. And right now, it doesn't seem to be the case today. There's very few companies that partner. There's some acquisitions that happen, but there's really not much collaboration going on. But that's for Spain. If you look at other countries like Netherlands, where we are also present, there it's completely different. I mean, from the get-go, they were way more open to collaborating, and we currently have a partnership there with a bank that it's working, and yeah, we are working together. So I think it depends on countries, and I think over the years it has changed a lot as well.
Marc, how would you say, how big is that risk of imitation? And probably you can just also explicate, what did they want to copy from you, right, to some extent?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the technology. I think they want to get inspiration on, okay, how are these guys innovating, right? And one problem you have is that banks have big teams, innovation teams, that have a lot of time. And you don't have a lot of time as an entrepreneur. So initially we were talking a lot with banks because we were excited about collaborating and working with them. Eventually one day we had an internal rule that was no more conversations with them because they have so much time that they can drag you on and on and on. And you need to focus on your business. So obviously, if there's a clear opportunity, but now we are extremely strict. If someone reaches out to us, do you want to meet for something? We're happy to meet, but for very specific reasons and goals. And yeah, they're going to try to copy technology. And I actually think sometimes they can, depending on the technology. But it will take many years until they build all the technology that fintechs build in months or quarters. I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have also expanded your business, right? Spain was not the last, the end game to some extent, and you have expanded to new countries such as the Netherlands. It's always interesting for us to know some of the challenges underlying those scaling initiatives, because it's a small venture. How do we go to another country? And probably you can share some of your experiences, potentially lessons learned.
Yeah, I think one important point when you expand is to set a budget aside for expansion and use that budget and split things, split resources. Because one common mistake is you start using the resources from your, let's say, central team or main country in order to expand to the new country. And then you never know if how much you're really spending, because it's your central team, right? So I think it's very important to set a budget, to be very convinced you're going to spend that money, and you're going to try to find out whether it works or not. And similarly, you also need to set clear KPIs, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you have to be willing to accept it doesn't work and stop and pull the plug. You have to have a very clear plan, a very clear budget, clear milestones, and be honest about it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then maybe a second challenge, I would say, is the culture, right? So when you open a new office, there's going to be a completely new team. And I think a very good way to basically teach the culture that you have in your central office or main team is to move people that have been many years in the company into the new office, at least temporarily. And well, now in COVID times, that's a bit more difficult. But traditionally, I think the best option has always been, okay, take someone that really lives the culture of the company and move this person to let's say, this new country and help set up the team, set up the company there. And I think that's also a very important point.
Marc, can you give us a sense of, at the end of the case, where did Novicap go? What was the growth? Kind of that we are getting an update picture, right, of the company.
Yeah. So currently, today we are a team of close to 60 people. As we've mentioned, we are mainly in 2 countries, although we are also operating in the UK from the investor point of view. And yeah, last year we grew 50%, even though COVID happened, we still managed to grow 50%. We funded a bit more than 200 million last year. And we're planning again on accelerated growth for this year, hopefully getting back to 2x and closing 2021 above 400 million. So that's, let's say, our challenge for this year.
That would be a fascinating milestone for sure. Reflecting back to when you started, there's often a debate in entrepreneurship: with whom should I do this? When should I do this? Starting with whom, what's your sense about your co-founders? Is it a good idea to ask a couple of friends to pursue an idea, other business professionals whom you might know? What do you think works? What's your experience?
I mean, it's my personal experience. I don't know if it applies to everyone, but what I would say is that starting with someone that is not your friend might be a really good idea. That's what I did, and it has worked very well for us. We've survived a very long time together. I think as co-founders, there's always a lot of tension, right? It's worse than a marriage. You spend a lot of time together, and it's challenging. But for us, it's been great, and the reason is because when you're not close friends, you typically say things as they are to each other. I think it's more, you have more of a professional relationship, and I think that's very helpful. I think the transparency, being super honest with the people you're going to work with for a very long time is super important. And I think if they're friends, that's more difficult.
It is more challenging for sure. The other important aspect is, when to start a business. Now, I know you were part of our admit group, right, for the Young Talent Program, right, which, you know, you typically do in order to get into the MBA and have a secured spot. But ultimately, you did not join us, right, and pursued your venture, right? So what were the trade-offs there, and when would it have made sense probably to pursue the MBA for you versus starting up with the co-founder on Novicap?
Yeah. First of all, let me say I think it's a very personal decision. Every situation is completely different. I'll give you a couple of examples. I think in our case, where we had a very clear idea in mind, we had a team that was already together working on that idea. We had a vision. We were super motivated. We had some previous experience in startups. I think the right thing to do was really pursuing the venture. It's easy to say now because it's gone well. Maybe if it didn't work out, I would have a different opinion. But then other situations, I think, are completely different. For instance, if you don't have any experience in the startup world, or you don't have an idea, or you don't have the people you want to start this company with, I think starting or doing an MBA is a great idea. Because, I mean, first of all, you're going to meet a lot of people. And I actually think that's very important. You have to select your co-founders and not bump into them, which is what typically happens. So I think being in a business school, learning from professors, classmates, everyone around, it's always a good idea, and especially if you don't know yet what company you want to start. So yeah, I think it's a very personal decision. In our case, it worked out not to go through an MBA. I think now was the right decision, and I think in many instances it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So, Marc, luckily, we were able to get you back, right? Because you were part of the We Grow program. We're sitting here in the Venture Hub, which is part of the IESE Entrepreneurship Center. And the We Grow program is for startups who are rapidly scaling up, getting some advice from mentors, some guidance, potentially some resources. And can you reflect a bit on your experience working with the We Grow program?
I think it's a very good give back or give first initiative from IESE for alumni and for also people that are starting companies. We've gone through the We Grow program. It's been a great experience. We've met very talented mentors that could help us a lot. We've been collaborating with We Grow as well through the Novicap podcast, where we interview people or mentors. So yeah, I think it's a great initiative to help entrepreneurs. And for us has been extremely helpful as well.
Well, thank you so much, Marc, for sharing your insight and knowledge with us, and that we could be taking part of your expertise and experiences. I want to close by reflecting on some of the issues we discussed. Sometimes we pick a business model and we think it's just the right one, right? And we are thinking it will revolutionize the world, will become the Google of finance in a rapid way. And then we got somehow punched in the face by our customers, learning that we still have to change. And I think what Marc really highlighted to us is that change is actually very positive. And listening to the customers and making those adaptations and understanding your stakeholders is one of the fundamental challenges here of entrepreneurs. We also learned that scaling can be hard, right, to some extent. Moving to another country, getting the resources for that, and pushing the business into new areas. And then we explored the whole new ecosystem of fintech, where a company like Novicap, a startup, now gets visible to the incumbent industry players, and it's going to be very interesting to see how things evolve. Thank you so much more, Marc, and I hope to see you back on campus very soon.
Thank you.